Okay, so welcome everybody, and I misestimated time, and so we needed to add a part 3 into our Rise of the Dictators as we talk about Nazi Germany. And so a little bit of background before we get into the heart of Nazi Germany, and that is, I suppose, the main character of this story is Adolf Hitler. And interestingly enough, Hitler is not a German, he's an Austrian, although both kind of embrace Germanic culture. But he avoided the draft when he was 24 during World War I. Instead, he wanted to fight for the Germans, so he goes up and joins a Bavarian unit. So you can see part of him and his comrades here from World War I. And he was pretty excited to fight for Germany. He probably always felt like that was more of his homeland than his place of birth. And he got the rank of corporal and was a messenger, and not an easy job, I suppose, in the trenches. And he had some success as being a soldier. He was rewarded the Iron Cross with 5 medals overall, which is pretty good. And it'd be kind of like the Medal of Honor in our country, the highest reward a soldier can get. He did capture 4 soldiers from the French single-handedly. He was blinded towards the end of the war, so he spent some time in a hospital. But most importantly, down here at the bottom, is he really embraces this stabbed in the back theory. And essentially this says that the Germans could have won World War I if only the leaders had not stabbed the people in the back. That really the leaders of the German Empire at the time didn't give the soldiers the chance they needed to succeed on the battlefield. And immediately after World War I, the Weimar Republic is set up as Nazi Germany is off in the distance here. So after World War I, this is a republic and a democracy, as the Kaiser, is no longer in control of Germany. But a lot of the people saw this government, one, they signed the Treaty of Versailles, so they automatically didn't necessarily like them very much. But the government was seen in general as weak and decadent, which is kind of corrupt, but morally bankrupt, maybe is a better way to say that. But the upswing is this was a time of artistic and cultural change in Germany, which maybe also is things that traditional Germans didn't necessarily like very much. A lot of American culture started to seep into Germany in the 20s, and there was a public perception that wealthy fat cats businessmen held tremendous power in Germany, while most of the rest of the society was poor and devastated from the loss of life and money and everything else that goes along with losing a world war. And poverty was fairly acute for certain classes, especially the lower class. We see some kids begging for food. But then this kind of artistic decadence that people would point to in the Weimar Republic. Additionally, Germany had a pretty big monkey on its back, and that is it had to pay for the war. It had to pay trillions of dollars, and Germany had to pay this back, called reparations. And this really leads to what's called hyperinflation, but essentially really high devaluing of one's money, or the rising of prices in a really dramatic fashion. And this really instilled fear in all classes, whether it was upper, middle, or lower class, but certainly certain people were more desperate than others, and citizens were really left to pay as the price of goods went up and the value of the German mark goes down. And that's really explained here. We can see this is what it costs to buy 1 ounce of gold, and just a couple years later, that's a lot of zeros. That their money became almost worthless, that people would use their currency for things like heating and wallpapering, but people are paying with baskets of money for everyday common goods. And this will really cause a shift in political natures, either from the center to the left, and people saying, "See, we should be more like the communists, that this capitalist economic system doesn't work," or to the right, people will find what they want in the Nazi Party and their promises. And that gets us to that now. So after the war, Hitler went through kind of a tough period, kind of wandered around, didn't know what he wanted to do with himself, but he wanders into this anti-Semitic political party called the German Workers' Party, and essentially gives a speech, and people quickly surround him and give him leadership. And they put out ads in newspapers, and they changed their name to National Socialists, or the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and Nazi is what that becomes kind of synonymous with. That's the acronym. And he began to have really big plans for the German Worker Party, and his plans are cut short early on. His followers attempt a coup, called the Beer Hall Putsch, but basically it started in a beer hall, and they tried to march and take over the German state of Bavaria, and it ended really badly. People use the word epic fail now, that might qualify. So Hitler and his guys are arrested for treason and thrown in jail. There he is, leaving for prison. So he is convicted of high treason, and he's supposed to serve 5 years, but he only actually ends up spending 9 months in jail. Some political pressure got him out. But during that time, he creates a book called Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. And he sells lots of it, 5 million copies, and makes him independently rich, so that he doesn't have to deal with some of the issues he had early in the German Workers' Party time. But this book really foreshadows all the things that Hitler will be about and will do during his leadership of Germany. So he really comes straight out and says the Jews are evil, that Germany is a superior race and the best race. He comes up with this idea of the Führer, or the leader, and really comes across pretty harshly against communism and democracy, but most especially his distaste for Russia and the fact that the people will have to, that Germany is bound to expand that way. So all pretty accurate descriptions of what will take place in his future. And politics is a funny business, and so actually his failed revolution actually makes him more popular, going to jail for a cause and fighting for what he believes in. People began to listen to some degree, and he seizes on this and uses propaganda pretty effectively with massive rallies and parades. We can see this, speeches, and what you don't see here in these pictures are he had an army of thugs called the Brown Shirts, who would intimidate and harm and affect the political process through brute force. And the Nazi Party does rise from 18% of the national election to 30% in 1932, but through some political wrangling, that Hitler will become chancellor, which is, in our political system, one doesn't really exist like this, but it might be seen as part of the president's job in our country, but not entirely. I'll explain that here in just a second. So here's kind of a list of what happened. So Hitler becomes chancellor, part in control of the German nation, but not entirely. And then his thugs, these brown shirt guys, stage a fire in what's called the Reichstag, but essentially this is Congress in our country. So the legislative branch and says, look, the communists and all these bad guys are after us. And they pass what's called the Enabling Act, which we'll talk about in just a second, but essentially giving Hitler dictatorial powers for 4 years. They say, you need to help our nation, get us under control. And the Night of the Long Knives is essentially when, once Hitler has power, he goes and has retribution against those he perceives as political enemies. So he eliminates by killing and throwing people in jail. And then there's the death of President Hindenburg, who had been kind of the steady leader for Germany after the war period. And he dies, and Hitler takes over his power and what was the chancellor. He combines them. And people actually start to have to take an oath to Hitler and not to the nation or the Constitution, that soldiers are required to do that. And really that leads to what's called the Führer, der Führer, if you're German. And so Hitler really becomes a clear dictator by 1933 or about there. And back to this Enabling Act, the economy was improving and people were pretty pleased about that. Germany actually recovers quicker in the Great Depression than America. He eliminates all his political opposition, whether it's communists or socialists or other people he doesn't like. He begins to rearm secretly at first the German army, and then publicly after a while. And like I said, they give him powers to become a dictator, and so he really doesn't need all these people who are saluting him, the Reichstag, eventually. But I think this is one of the world's creepiest pictures in history. But President Hindenburg's death gives him the chance to combine these two roles. So trying to separate power politically, he combines it. Additionally, just looking at life in Nazi Germany began to change pretty significantly once Hitler takes over. And one of the more effective things he did to gain a lot of power and influence in the country was to work with the young, because they have little life experience and they're easily influenced. And so he starts what's called Hitler Youth. And so think of kind of a deranged version of the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, but it included education, and exercise was a big part of that component, kind of a camping and hiking experience. And we'll see the boys do the same thing, running and playing with radios and creating camp. But all this really is an effort to conform people and to establish that the Nazis are the authority you should obey, and really transforms the youth culture in Germany pretty significantly. Additionally, Nazi Germany did enjoy an economic rebound. We'll see the use of public works projects is pretty effective in Germany, so building new roads or putting little kids to work or guys in shovels, and sooner or later you can just replace these shovels with guns. So people saw this as a pretty significant sign that Hitler's leadership was maybe not bad after all. And people are usually willing to embrace, to some degree, economic prosperity for losing some political maybe freedoms. And so we see prosperity returns, busy streets, people eating good food, propaganda all out here. But most interestingly, one, the government issues a lot of German citizens radios so that they can, interestingly, hear the government's take on things and Hitler's propagandas and speech. But interestingly enough, Americans love the Beetle, but you never guess who designed it. And that would be Mr. Hitler himself. He said, we needed a car for the people. So something you might not have known, but if you like Beatles, I guess you can thank Adolf Hitler. Moving on, Germany wanted to show off its awesomeness in its revival in 1936, being a fascist state. And Germany wanted to also kind of highlight its superiority. So it invites nations around the world to show off. So we can see some pictures around here, kind of this combination of Olympic fervor but also nationalistic pride. But there's some pretty cool moments. One is an American, Jesse Owens, really frustrates the claims of Aryan superiority because he kills everybody on the track field. He beats them by a long shot, and so a pretty good moment for a lot of Americans, and in particular cheering on an African American at this time. Other things that Nazi Germany does is begins to use the power of symbols and architecture. So we can see the eagle and the swastika, these big buildings, and eventually Hitler had big plans. He wanted to create a new Berlin, essentially the most powerful and big and important city in all of the world, or at least in Europe. And also art and propaganda were pretty famous. We saw some examples of propaganda, but this kind of idea that the ideal German girl and woman cheering the troops off to war, and this ideal leader, right, who's, I think this one's just hilarious, kind of a knight in shining armor. But they wanted to influence perception and use that as a means to control people. So just a quick review. Hitler gains power, but not initially. There's problems in the Weimar Republic and low confidence. We'll see hyperinflation really leads to that issue. A failed attempt with the beer hall putsch for Hitler and his boys actually leads to success with Mein Kampf, and eventually Hitler gaining control with the Enabling Act. And a quick reminder, they team up with the Italians in this Pact of Steel. So guys, that is it. Have a good one. I'll see you later.